validate, because what do we all want to know? What does it does, and will it work for me? Okay, and so we're going to hear most of the morning from David Schmidt, again, our business inventor and CEO. And I also want to thank everybody who helped hold this together. Emily Hollingshead in the back is our VP of Sales. We also have corporate executive Lori Berger here with us today. And we couldn't have done it without a team of exceptional people. I want to reach out to Helen Weldon, who trust me, I could not. So after you hear David speak about the technology, you start to understand what this is. We're going to take a little short break. And at that point, you get up, stretch, use the restrooms, get with your teams, talk with them, invite it to you. And when we come back, I'm going to invite you to come back because afterwards, David has graciously said he will do some Q&A. So if you did not get a card when you came in at registration, go ahead and raise your hand. Angela will kind of come by and pass those out. We're not going to get to every question. And one thing you need to know is that we don't treat, diagnose, or cure any disease states. So if you're going to ask a question, it needs to be symptom related. Do not put a disease state on, or we won't answer the question. Okay, but if you've got some symptoms, you've got some questions, you've heard a question, not sure what it is, write it down, and we'll get to as many as we can in the afternoon. We're focusing in the morning on our lead stem cell technology. In the afternoon, for those that are interested, we'll delve into some of the other patches and technologies as well, okay? So, why am I standing here? I'm standing here because in the fall of 2019, Harris called me up and he said, you got to see this. He goes, you're not going to believe the science. You've got to see what this does. And so he sent me a sleeve of X39 patches. And I set them on the counter and I walked away. Right? Ever done that? So my husband, Barry, comes up to me and says, what are these? I go, I don't know, Harris sent them. I said, there's some kind of stem cell activation patch. He goes, great, I want to try them. So Barry puts on an X39 patch. He starts wearing it. He changes nothing else. Shortly before Christmas, a couple of days, he's trimming some hedges. And he gets a puncture wound in his leg the diameter of a quarter. He comes in the house and I go, ooh, that's not good. It's going to take a while to heal. But fast forward 7 days, he gets out of the shower and he says, look at this. Oh, you won't be able to see it today, he's got pants on. But he said, look at this. And it looked like a teeny tiny little scar when he was a child. It had healed that quickly. And I said, that's what they told me it would do. So fast forward about 3 weeks, we're heading to a conference. And he's getting dressed and he comes in and he goes, none of my pants fit. I said, I noticed. He goes, why didn't you tell me? I said, because you're my guinea pig. Because we would have done, right? If I said, wow, you look like you're losing weight, he would have gone on a diet, he would have started doing 2-a-days at the gym, right? You get inspired once you start losing weight and your shape starts changing. So at that point, I said, this is amazing. I called up the woman that introduced Harris to it, and I said, here's what happened to my husband. Is this normal? She said, the wound healing, yes. Please don't tell people they're going to stick a patch on their back of their neck and lose their belly fat. She said, the reason why this is working is because he already does the right things. And his body is behaving like he's younger. And he came home actually that day from the gym and he said, this is what it was like when I worked out when I was 20. So what did I do? I'm gonna wear one of those. Right? So I put it on and better sleep. I'm almost 58 years old, so better sleep was about the only thing I was really noticing. And they said to me, you're very healthy, you're fit, you've been taking care of yourself, you may not feel anything. Fast forward about 2 weeks, and I started realizing that I was recovering quicker after workouts. I wasn't getting sore anymore, even after a really hard workout. Fast forward 2 months, and an old meniscus injury starts talking to me again. And I called up Dr. Nicholas and I said, why is this hurting? And he said, because it's healing. And so I gave it a few weeks, gone. I could sit on the floor again, I could kneel, it didn't hurt in the middle of the night, lunges, squats didn't hurt. So that just tells you everybody's experience is going to be different, right? So I'm going to turn it over to Harris and let him tell you a little bit about what he did, because he was vetting the company for over a year. And then you'll take it from there.
Let's give Tanya a big hand. Oh, yeah. People follow you. I know a lot of people that are here. Some of you know I grew up here in Sarasota. And I opened up this hotel a little over 40 years ago. And I was a restoration specialist. Yes, that is what some people would call me. But you know, I've been somebody that's really following trends for over the last 4 decades. Being a baby boomer, being 64 years young, I've been following everything from Gen Fix and the running boom to the circuit training for people who families were growing, right into a lot of other things that have happened. And you know, and I decided to really dedicate my life to showing people how they would look, feel, perform younger. And for me, have more fun and freedom. Does anyone have any interest in that? Well, you know, that's what I've dedicated the last 40 years to. And through my, I guess you could say, through my journey, I've had the opportunity to see some amazing things happen in, you know, just the last 20 years. The human genome, you know, back in the early 2000s, finally they figured it out. Stem cell therapy started to happen right after that. And I was part of 2 of those movements, and I really was looking for, like all of us, something that really had real science, something that really had validation, and that really could slow down the aging process. Anybody, you know, interested in that? Well, I know I was, and you know, and I know that I think want to have a fulfilling life. You know, you don't want to age like potentially you do like your parents. My parents did not age well, but I do see a whole new movement happening. And as Connie mentioned, about 2 years ago, my good friend Robin Mascari called me up, and I'd seen her a few months earlier, and she was in terrible pain. She had a bad knee replacement. She was on some pain medication. It was taking its toll on her. She was on crutches and just not in good shape. And then about 6 months later, I saw her in Golden, Colorado. She stopped in to visit. And as soon as she walked up, no limp, no cane, no crutches. And she looked, seriously, she looked several years younger. And she had lost some weight. And I said, what the heck is going on? She said, she started to share with me that she was getting ready to go out and spend a lot of money with stem cell injections. And somebody, a friend of hers, heard her say that and said that he had found a patch that actually activated stem cells. And it's like most people, I know myself being included, I thought that sounds too good to be true. Anybody feel that way? I did. And so, but I saw what it did, and I saw her conviction that she had. And then she said, you know what, and I'm one of those people that I'm going to share something and use it. I don't know about you. There's a lot of different things people come to me with that have no validation, no science behind it. And, you know, I'm polite about it. But I'd like to share anything with somebody, at least I got the company. And so I asked her, how do I meet the founder, the CEO, this brilliant scientist you're talking about? And she said, well, here's where it's at. It would be actually we're in Orlando. I think that's at the time. And I drove to Orlando, and I spent 2 or 3 of the most amazing hours of my life. And I've been out to the first genomic facility in South Korea that launched the natural product. I've seen amazing technology. And when David sat down and shared his 30+ years where he's been dedicated to energy medicine, and he was born to do this, I mean, he honestly is a genius. And you're going to find out in a few minutes firsthand that I sat there captivated. And so I literally decided to, spend some time. We came down actually to Sarasota, spent some time with some of my hardest critics in the health field, doctors and some lawyers, and remember that day. And I was just amazed how he could actually convey very complicated information in such a way that empowered people to really decide to give this a try. And then I spent time flying out to Las Vegas, where they had a conference and they had scientists from all over the world there. I spent 4 days of my life there listening to these scientists, listening to people that were using the product. And then I went out to David's home office in San Diego to check that out. So I spent almost 1 year literally using the product, doing my research, and getting to know who David and LifeWave was. And I was, it just kept getting better and better, to be honest with you. And, at 64, I play about 20 plus hours of pickleball. Most of you, some of you are pickleball players. Anybody play pickleball in here? Wow, look at all these hands. Well, pickleball is a healthy addiction. And, we all want to play pickleball better longer, like me. And there's a little word, phrase, or mantra is OMG, one more game. And one more game ends up being 10 more games. And I can tell you that with having a double hip replacement, shoulder rebuilt, Don Johnson, matter of fact, is in the back of the room, Daryl, he rebuilt my shoulder back about 30 years ago in Canada. And so, for me, I started to see my recovery becoming better, my stamina was better. I could put all these hours and not be pumping off the court anymore, and playing with guys half my age. So I know the products work, but without further ado, what I want to do is bring up a very good friend of mine, someone I believe in the world. He is going to really, in my opinion, take you through a journey and a paradigm shift on how you can look, feel, and perform younger. And he's even going to touch on age diversity and how you can truly become biologically younger. But the one thing I love about David is that, yes, he's a brilliant scientist, he's a genius, he's the CEO, he's the founder of LifeWave. But you know what he really is? He's an altruistic philanthropist, and he sees how this can heal the world. He sees this being a vehicle to help bring real science and nature to humankind when the world needs it most. Would you agree? Yeah. So without further ado, I want to bring up my good friend and the CEO founder of LifeWave, David Schmidt.
Lot to live up to. Could we give another nice round of applause for Connie, please? Well, thank you all for coming out on Saturday. There's a lot of other things that you can do, but I appreciate you all being here. There's going to be a tremendous amount of technical information today on stem cells, so let's start off by grounding this in reality so we can all relate to it. How many men do we have here that watch superhero movies? Okay. So, ladies, I'm going to tell you something about men that you probably don't know. And this wisdom comes from Jerry Seinfeld. You see, when men watch superhero movies, they're not watching characters on a screen. These are options, okay? Men want to know what superhero they can be, right? So when they look at a movie like The Avengers, they might think, oh, gee, I could be Captain America, right? And one of my favorite superheroes, any of you that have seen my webinars would know that my favorite superhero is Iron Man. And I relate to wanting to be a genius billionaire, inventor, philanthropist. But another superhero that I really love is Wolverine, because Wolverine doesn't age and Wolverine heals instantly. Now, this may seem like science fiction, but let's go back to the 1960s for a moment. And in the 1960s, Stan Lee, who is, let's say, the father of many, many comic book heroes, created Spider-Man. And so, of course, this was the story of young Peter Parker as a teenager who gets bit by a radioactive spider. He gets all these powers, and now he has to create these web shooters that shoot spider silk to tie up the villains and the bad guys. Well, that, of course, was nothing more than science fiction and comic books and fantasy back in the 1960s. But did you know today that there are at least 5 companies in the world, one big one in Germany, another one here in the United States, that commercially makes spider silk. And the way that they do it is they extract the genes that are associated with the spider silk protein. They can take this from a black widow spider, they can take it from an orb weaver, but they extract the genetic material, the gene coding, and they will insert that into a bacteria like E. coli, or they insert it into common yeast, brewer's yeast that is used to make beer, and then they cultivate it. So this could be called, with bacteria, it's called bacterial fermentation, but it simply means we put the bacteria or the yeast in a chamber at temperature with all the nutrients that it needs so that these organisms can multiply. We then extract the protein through centrifuge and then weave it into a thread and then a fabric. So if today some young teenager wanted to make web shooters that shot real spider silk, that's a reality today. Whereas back in the 60s, it was science fiction. So this is the way the world is changing, and information is changing more rapidly now than ever before. And it will continue to do so with the advent of things like artificial intelligence. So the question then is, how far are we away from being able to dramatically improve the rate at which people heal? And how close are we to preventing people from aging? Is this science fiction? Are we 50 years away? Or is this something a lot closer than most people imagine? And we're going to be delving into this. I'll give you a spoiler alert that we're much, much closer to these things than most people realize. Even in conventional Western science, we're not more than 20 years away from reversing human aging. Many people will put it at less than 10 years. And there's billions of dollars of research money that's going into this. So for example, David Sinclair at Harvard was given over $1 billion to find ways to manipulate the genome with drugs to reverse human aging. So there's some very serious money that's being put into this. So where we're going to start with this is first looking at what can we do today to improve our health in some very significant ways. Can we take some actions now which will lead to reversing at least portions of the human aging process? And what's so exciting is that there's things available today, right now, that we can be doing to start us on that path. And I'm going to share some things that I'm doing in my lab and some of the research that we've collected, which show that this is possible. And we're developing not only new technology, but new products based on the technology to take us further along in this journey. So let's start somewhere at the beginning here. And let's talk about stem cells and some of the problems around it. So how many of you know what stem cells are? Let's maybe start there. Okay, most of you. Okay, good. So stem cells are universal cells in the body. There's many different types of stem cells, and as they divide, they become more specialized. So there was just an article out the other day about what are called totipotent stem cells. There's pluripotent stem cells, then multipotent, and then specialized tissue. So in other words, every cell in your body was once a stem cell. And you have stem cells in your body. They can be in your body fat, they can be in your bone marrow. We all have stem cells. And when you get an injury, it's going to be the stem cells that are attracted to the injury site and repair the damaged tissue. It's going to be the stem cells that are going to replace old, worn out cells in the body. And this is part of the miracle of how we were created and how the body functions. Sometimes we think of inflammation and stress as being a bad thing. But actually what happens is, let's say you got an injury to the knee and you start to get some inflammation. Well, first, there's a release of oxidative chemicals, and the oxidative stress, which if it accumulates as we age is a bad thing. In this case, the oxidative stress will keep down bacterial infection. It's there to destroy bacteria, so we don't get an infection. Then these molecules attract inflammatory cytokines, so we can begin to tear down the damaged tissue. And again, if this, in people that are young and healthy, this is a normal process. As we age, we can accumulate inflammation and then we damage healthy tissue. But in this case, we get the inflammatory cytokines at the damaged tissue, and these act as signaling molecules to attract the stem cells. Now, when we're young and healthy, everything works the way that it should. The inflammation goes away. Intracellular antioxidants help to disperse with the oxidative and inflammatory stress. The stem cells repair the tissue, and everything is fine. As we age, that system begins to break down. The stem cells age with the rest of the body. There's something called the Hayflick limit. And so if you take cells and you allow them to divide, they'll divide, let's say, about 50 times or so. And so in human beings, this means that when we get into our 70s, our cells stop dividing. So if we want to live much longer and healthier, one of the things that we need to figure out how to do is keep the cells dividing. For those of you that are familiar with telomeres, this is a function of regenerating the telomeres. So telomeres are rods on the end of the chromosomes. As the cells divide, the telomeres shorten, and then eventually we run out of telomeres, the cells can't divide, and we're in trouble. So one of the things that we look at in our research, which we're all the way at 3 years in human studies, is how can we regenerate the telomeres and keep the cells divided. We've been very successful in that research. So stem cells age with the rest of the body, and as we age, the stem cells slow down. So we did some research that I'm going to share with you in a moment. And this was at the National University of Ireland in Galway. So we have over 80 clinical studies that we've done over the years. And for those of you that are new, if you go to lifewave.com and you go to the science section of the website, you'll see many of our clinical studies posted there. Well, what we wanted to do was see if we could find a way, and this is going back to around 2010 or so, in 2008. We wanted to see if we could find a way to activate the stem cells in the body. So at this point, I started LifeWave in 2002. And up to that time, I have been doing work for the US Navy through a number of government contractors. General Dynamics Electric Boat and Newport News Shipbuilding were the two primary ones. And I had created this new type of power generation equipment. And I was in a meeting at General Dynamics, and they said, well, we can't put this in a sub because it will take all of the oxygen out of the sub in a few minutes. And I said, well, what are you doing for oxygen in an emergency situation? And they showed me these candles. And they're called chlorine candles. And you burn these candles and they produce oxygen. And they're about 60% efficient. And you have, because they're so dirty, when they burn, you have to put them in an oven and then filter out the soot from the oxygen, and then that goes into the sub. And I happened to make the comment that I couldn't believe on $1 billion sub they were burning candles for oxygen. That may not have been the smartest thing to say. And so the fellow that ran emergency system said to me, Well, if you can figure out a better way to do it, go ahead. So I called him 4 weeks later and I said, Don, I figured out a better way to do it. When can I come and see you? And in that 4 weeks, I had conceptualized and our team had prototyped, built, and tested an entirely new method for producing oxygen on a sub. And, but he didn't believe me, and so he invited me up to give a presentation, and I thought there were going to be about 2 or 3 engineers there, and there were 30 engineers. And they just wanted to embarrass me and get rid of it. And so they took my device and they put it into a mass spectrometer, and they showed that my device, which was about the size of a can of soda, was producing 99.9% oxygen. And there were no toxic byproducts from it. And this could keep one person alive for 4 hours, which they said was impossible. Think about the huge cylinders that firemen wear that can provide them with enough air for 30 to 60 minutes, depending on the pressure. So this didn't seem to make any sense. There was one fellow there that was from Black Projects. He contacted me 2 weeks later, and I got invited to be part of the design team for one of the Navy's mini subs. And the crew of the mini subs were Navy SEALs. So this fellow asked me, well, this is the project that we're working on. You're an out-of-the-box thinker. I'm really impressed with the work that you've been doing. See what kind of contribution you can make to this project. So I thought, okay, these guys are going on missions that are 30 hours, 60 hours. They're taking caffeine, they're taking amphetamines to stay awake. There has to be a better way that we can give them energy without having to rely on these drugs. So I began going back to earlier research that I had done in energy medicine and ways to electronically change the metabolism of the cell. And after a few years of research, I came up with this idea that if we could communicate with the cell, stimulate the skin, communicate with the cell, we might be able to turn on energy production selectively. Meaning, as we age, the body gets more energy from carbohydrates and less from fats. And carbohydrates have about half the energy that fats do. So if we could somehow communicate with the cells and turn on fat burning, then we have a natural way, a way that works with the human body of turning on energy production. This happened to be in 2001, 9/11 hit, and the only thing that these companies and the government were interested in were weapons. And so I thought, well, probably there are some consumers that would be interested in a new way of burning fat and getting energy. So I started LifeWave based on this technology, and we started the network marketing business in 2004, and it's really been amazing ever since. And over that period of time, we've learned a lot about how to selectively turn on specific biochemical pathways in the body just using light. So this is a form of light therapy, but it's very different than conventional light therapy. So conventional light therapy, we might use things like infrared lamps to relieve pain and stimulate circulation, and that's fantastic. We might use cold lasers at specific wavelengths to stimulate collagen production, or even be used in tissue repair or in hair growth. And these are all recognized by the FDA today, which is very fortunate. But we went a step further to look at how can we create a passive device that's powered by body heat that will stimulate the skin with different wavelengths of light to selectively turn on, let's say, synthesis of different peptides, with copper peptide being one example. And the advantage to this is that when we were doing our research in stem cells, the solution that most companies are driving towards is injecting stem cells into the body. And this is going to be the future. There's no getting around it. There's not a company today that has really had a major success in the stem cell industry, and this is why you don't see wide-scale use of it and regulatory approval. But it's obvious because as we age, the stem cells slow down. So if we could get injections of young, healthy stem cells, this could facilitate injury repair. Another thing that you see when you study stem cells is that they release less growth factors. So at this work that we did at the university, we took mesenchymal stem cells and we looked at their ability to move and their ability to release growth factors. And in donors over the age of 60, you see that stem cell activity has declined remarkably, 60 to 80% as compared to someone in their teens or 20s. And worse yet, eventually there's no more stem cells as a practical matter. And this is a very serious problem for anyone, let's say, over the age of 75, because as anyone over the age of 75 knows, that their ability to heal has declined dramatically. And so getting a broken bone after you're 75 or 80 is a very, very serious problem. So what can we do about this? Well, stem cell injections, the ones that are available today, are still relatively expensive and they're out of reach of the majority of the population. And there are risks associated with it, especially in the early days of stem cell therapy. In animal studies over in Japan, Japan is doing some very interesting work on using stem cells to treat Parkinson's disease. And actually the first human study was started and approved about 1 year ago. But in the initial studies, didn't go so well. And monkeys were injected with stem cells into the brain. The monkeys died, and when they opened the monkeys up, what they found was that there was hair, skin, bone inside of the brain. The stem cells divided in an uncontrolled fashion. So this has been part of the problem with injecting stem cells in the body, is how to control the way the stem cells divide and differentiate. So there are some risks. They don't always produce a beneficial outcome. So here's another problem with stem cells, is that they are attracted to damaged tissue, which is great, that's the way it's supposed to work. But as we age, our ability to manage inflammation declines. And so this is what leads to conditions such as arthritis, right? We're not reducing our inflammation, we've got aches and pains throughout the body, and we start to get autoimmune disorders. So when you inject stem cells into an injury site, if there's not control over the inflammatory process, the stem cells die from the elevated levels of inflammation. So this is a little bit like a moth to the flame scenario, right? You have to have the inflammation in order for stem cells to go to the injury site. But if the inflammation hangs around too long, then we got a problem with the stem cells. Okay, does this all make some sense? I need to start bringing the coffee around much more, you guys are ready. All right. We have to get up and stretch in a minute. Okay. So the question then is there any way to use the stem cells that are already in our body? So imagine the advantage that this would have. When we were looking at this problem, our company already had a product for increasing fat burning, increasing glutathione levels, the body's master antioxidant, increasing carnosine levels, another very important antioxidant. And so what we were looking at is there any way we could create technology to take the stem cells that are already in your body and get them to behave like younger, healthier cells? And this resulted which is now more than 80 patents globally. So we accumulated quite a bit of information on this. And the place actually where we started was on using low frequency electromagnetic energy. Of course, light is electromagnetic energy, but we decided that what we wanted to do was create these devices. This is one of my inventions that I'm going to show you. And we developed it at our lab in San Diego. And the first time that we were testing this out, I made a presentation to Dr. Tim O'Brien. He's a very well-known and well-respected stem cell scientist in Ireland. And he runs the Regenerative Medicine Institute. And so I made this presentation to him about stimulating stem cells using a novel form of electromagnetic energy produced by these devices that I'll show you. And Dr. O'Brien said, I really wish I took more physics in school because I don't understand the principle, but you're making a compelling argument, so let's go ahead and do the research. And we even got funding from Scientific Foundation, part of the Irish government, to do this work. So this is one of the devices. There's actually 24 different iterations of this today. So hence all the patents, and we've really come a long way with it. But we refer to these as double helix conductors because it mimics the structure and function of DNA. So it probably would be important to tell you that I'm a person that believes that we are created by God. And this is important because I don't think human beings spontaneously came out of rocks or soil, or we evolved from, chickens or whatever, people think in that world. I think we were divinely created. And this is important from a research perspective because if we were created, that means there was intelligent design. And anyone in the field of biology will definitely look at the structure of the cell and say there has to be some type of intelligent design here, or at least intelligence in the cell. And that means that there is a biological code that we can tap into. So if we can understand how the cells are functioning, what this biological code is, we can begin to unravel some of the secrets of the human body and create technology that's going to help us in hopefully some very significant ways. So through prayer, I was given these insights about how to create these devices. And what we found with them was pretty remarkable. We first did in vitro work. We worked with Dr. Glenn Ryan, who is very well known for in the published literature on his in vitro studies. And what we found was that we could tune these coils in such a way so that we could induce neurite outgrowth and neurogenesis in culture, and then we later did this in animals. So why is that important and why should we care? Well, let's take a big problem today globally, which is diabetes. And as a result of having high blood sugar, the peripheral nerves are damaged, and this leads to diabetic neuropathy. And so if we could use stem cell technology to regenerate the peripheral nerves, we could reverse the diabetic neuropathy. In early stage diabetic neuropathy, people experience pain and inflammation. So this would be the first life-changing benefit for people. But more importantly, as diabetic neuropathy progresses, about 20% of the population require amputation. And so if we could treat diabetic neuropathy either early on or in late stage, we could potentially save people from amputation. So that was the interest. So we did our in vitro studies that were very successful, and then we were approved for animal studies. And in the standard rabbit model, you induce a ulceration in the ear. The ear is turned over so the rabbit can't scratch at it, and then you see the rate of healing. and you assess that after a period of only 7 days. And this is what the ulceration looks like. So in a human being, it would be the same thing. On the foot or on the ankle, you would see an open wound called an ulceration. And people that have later stage diabetic neuropathy need to keep their foot wrapped and vacuum sealed to prevent infection, because an infection, again, can be deadly. What we found our very first time out is that we got statistical significance with using only energy. So instead of having to inject stem cells, we treated the wound with this electromagnetic device, and the wound healed faster to statistical significance than the rabbits that were allowed to heal on their own. Now, there's something very important about this, and that is there is a product called Matrigel. And Matrigel is a collagen gel that has mesenchymal stem cells embedded into it. And NUIG was doing a study on that, same type of study, and what we found was that using electromagnetic energy, the wound healed just as fast as using stem cells. So in other words, this was the first time that we saw that you don't have to inject stem cells in the body. You can use energy to activate the stem cells and get them to heal the body faster. So we've worked with a lot of different things over the years. A standard stem cell model is planaria. These are planaria, they're these little flatworms. You ever see these before? Ever use them in biology class? Okay. Well, they're pretty remarkable, right? With planaria, you cut them in half, and I promise you they don't feel anything. Not one of them, worms, has ever complained before about this. You cut them in half, and the head portion will regrow a new tail, and the tail will regrow a new head. So this is one of the reasons why scientists in the field of regenerative medicine are so interested in studying planaria. And by the way, the entire genome of the planaria has been mapped. Because if human beings had these type of abilities, right, we could just, like Wolverine, heal instantly. It doesn't just stop with planaria, though. There are many great instances where we can turn to nature for solutions. And this is, to me, one of the things that's so magnificent about nature and the world around us is that we face incredible problems and challenges, right? I don't think the world's ever been as screwed up as it is today. But the good news is that there are answers, right? There are definitely answers, and we can find them, many of these answers and solutions in nature. So when we're talking about the subject of regeneration, and we're looking at, is it possible to stop biological aging? There are already organisms on the planet today that don't age. And planaria is a very good example of this, right? Planaria are effectively immortal. Over in Japan, there's a scientist that studies something called the immortal jellyfish. And this is a really interesting trick because not only does this type of jellyfish not age, but when it gets to the end of its life, it kind of goes into this chrysalis stage, drops to the bottom of the ocean, and then comes back later as a brand new young jellyfish and restarts the aging cycle. So they're very difficult to cultivate, and so that's why most scientists don't work with them. Tardigrades are another one that are almost indestructible. You can take a tardigrade into space and it survives. You can pull out all of the water from a tardigrade, give it water, and it's back alive again, right? So there's some of these examples in nature that are extraordinary. But we're interested in the planaria and using it as a model because they're very easy to work with. The genome is mapped, and if we make any changes to the regenerative rate of the planaria, we can understand how it's doing. Now, normally a planaria will regenerate in about 17 days. And in the stem cell world, people are trying to figure out how could we get this down to like 15 days. And with our technology, we're able to regenerate the head of a planaria in only 8 days. So we did really well with it. Now we continued to develop this over a period of a few years, and eventually we were regenerating the head of the planaria in only 16.5 hours. And what's important about that is that we began to figure out ways to exceed the rate limiting steps of protein synthesis in cells. Meaning there's a biological limit to how much energy the cell can make, how many proteins the cells can synthesize. And we found a way to transfer energy from one of these devices to cells where we can exceed what would normally be those limits and get these extraordinary results. We invited in Dr. Ricardo Zayas, who is a stem cell scientist in San Diego and very well known for his work in the planaria. And we told him about what we were doing, and he said, oh, yeah, it's not possible. And we said, well, can you come over, buy you a coffee, look at what we're doing here. And what we did was we showed him on, we put the planaria under a video camera and then the video camera up on screen. We cut the planaria, and with the most advanced form of this technology, we were able to show him that within less than 15 minutes, the wound was closing, and in less than a day, the planaria regenerated. So we are closer than you think to having technology that will heal the body extraordinarily rapidly. The future that we see with this is that one of these goes into an ER and someone is in an automobile accident and they have these life-threatening injuries. They have internal bleeding. They can be given an injection of stem cells. They can use this equipment and begin to heal those injuries very rapidly, saving people's lives. That's the future that we see. But let's get back to today. And how can we use what we learned from this research in something that is affordable to everyone, inexpensive, convenient, easy to use, safe, and produces dramatic results, right? That's what we want to do. So the question is, how would this technology work? Well, at the time, I already had more than 15 years of research into light therapy. And the question was, since light is electromagnetic energy, is there any way with the patch technology to activate stem cells? At the beginning of this research project, I didn't think it was possible, but eventually, of course, we figured out how to do it. Now, light therapy has been around for, of course, maybe a few thousand years. You could go back to India, and there's a 5,000-year history of treating the body with different colored lights for treating all different types of disease. In ancient Greece, at the Acropolis, they had glass that was different colors, and we used sunlight as the light source, again, to treat different types of disorders with different colored lights. In the early 1900s, a Danish scientist was awarded a Nobel Prize on the discovery involved in light therapy. And today, you can say there's about 10 to 15 years of published literature, over 5,000 clinical studies on how the biochemistry changes in response to specific wavelengths of light. So how are we going to do this? Well, what makes the patches different is that it's a completely passive device. That's the first distinction. So we can take one of these patches, they contain stereoisomers of amino acids and sugars and other compounds, and they're activated by body heat. So the patches are designed to trap body heat, and this is quite easy to show. I just used a infrared temperature monitor, and you can see the temperature of the patch is higher than the surrounding skin. Patches are activated by body heat. What we do in our lab is we use a piece of equipment called an FTIR, Fourier transform infrared, and this can show absorption, reflection of light off of a material. So we know that the patches reflect light. They stimulate the skin with very low levels of light, and then through our clinical studies, we'll use blood testing, urine testing, and different bioelectrical tests, which I'll show you some examples of, to document that there are statistically significant changes that are occurring in the body. But basically, you put a patch on, it stimulates the skin with light, and it activates the stem cells. Okay. And this is just an illustration of what that would look like. The patches, by the way, they reflect wavelengths of light in both the infrared and the visible spectra. So when we're doing something simple, like elevating fat burning, there's a few wavelengths of light that are associated with that, 810 nanometer, 630, 660. But as we get into more sophisticated things, like elevating copper peptide or glutathione, the techniques are a little bit different. Now, these patches can be applied just about anywhere. And that's one of the really great things about them, is that if you want to put it on the back of the neck or below the belly button, as per our instructions, they will elevate copper peptide and activate stem cells through the body. So the placement is almost irrelevant. However, if you have an area that needs extra attention, if you have some type of injury and you want to apply it at the injury site, you certainly can do that, but it's not necessary. This would be known, by the way, as photobiomodulation. It's the technical term, but it just simply means we're using light to activate a specific biochemical pathway. A really easy way to think about this is you go out in the sun. It's a good thing we're here in Florida because everyone can relate to this, right? You go out in the sun, and the sunlight will cause our body to make vitamin D. Some new research that's showing that when you go out to the beach during the day, the infrared light coming off the sand increases your melatonin levels. And that helps you put you into a relaxed state. And of course, melatonin is a very, very powerful antioxidant. We also know that vitamin D and melatonin are antivirals that are capable of suppressing things like COVID. I used to live in California. I don't live there anymore because when the government decided to shut down the beaches during the pandemic, I thought, how silly is this? We're cutting people off from naturally elevating vitamin D and melatonin, which are antivirals that can treat and prevent the disease that we're locking everybody in the house with. I mean, what kind of insanity is this, right? It's crazy talk. Anyway, I'm happy to be in Florida. So how do we activate the stem cells? Now, fortunately, the chemistry behind this is known today. And we focused in on one specific peptide called GHK-Cu. This is copper peptide. It's obviously a tripeptide of glycine, histidine, and lysine that has a very, very high affinity for binding with copper, and that's where the magic occurs. So this was first discovered by Dr. Lauren Picard. Now, how many of you remember from high school science, maybe it was in biology, and you were taught that we are born, we age, and we die. How many of you were taught that? That? Okay. Right? And by and large, you would have to say that's more or less true. Right? Of human beings. It'd be, I would say, if you were in a legal battle and you had one side arguing that we're born, we age, we die, that party is probably going to win the case. There's plenty of evidence for it. But that's not really the question. The question is that dogma? Is it irrevocable? Is there a way that we can get around this? And what Dr. Lauren Picard did was he took liver cells from people that were over the age of 80, and he began to incubate them in the blood of people that were in their 20s, and he found now that the liver cells behave like younger, healthier cells. Liver is an interesting choice because we know the liver is the most regenerative organ in the human body. And what he found after several years of work is that it was the copper peptide levels that were responsible for causing these liver cells, old liver cells, to behave like younger, healthier cells. Now, this was in contradiction to everything that we've been taught in the biological sciences, that normally you have this inertia in one direction on aging, and there's nothing that you can do about it. But here he was finding evidence that it is possible to alter the aging process and revert these cells to younger cells. There's some other work that's very interesting with this as well. Bruce Ames, University of California, pioneered the use of the nutrients acetyl L-carnitine and alpha-lipoic acid. And what he found was that these nutrients could upregulate mitochondrial function and get cells to start behaving like younger, healthier cells. My favorite example is Jesus. And for those of you that aren't Christians, I don't mean to offend, but I think he was an anti-aging scientist, because what he said is love one another. And what do you know what happens? When we love one another, we elevate the hormone oxytocin. Now, if you take oxytocin and you inject it into older cells, and specifically muscle tissue, those muscle cells revert and become younger, healthier cells. And it's been shown that people that are in loving relationships have less inflammatory stress. Their immune system functions better. Their whole body works better. So here we have yet another example in human beings that by keeping oxytocin levels elevated, we can get partial age reversal effects. So after years of studying this, what Dr. Picard found was that what was really going on with copper peptide was that it was resetting about 1/3 of the human genome to a younger, healthier state. So while it acted as an anti-inflammatory and it activated stem cells and it had antioxidant activity, what was really going on is that it was resetting over 4,000 genes to a more youthful state. Now, this is really powerful. Think about resveratrol, right? How many of you take a resveratrol supplement? Okay. There's nothing wrong with resveratrol. And by the way, there's some new research that has come out that shows that olive oil, in fact, may be even more powerful at activating sirtuin genes than resveratrol. So that's something to keep in mind. But in any case, what got people so excited about resveratrol is that it could flip one or two of the sirtuin genes that are associated with aging back to a more youthful state. It wasn't that resveratrol was a great antioxidant, it was really in its ability to modulate genes. And here we have something that's modulating thousands of genes. And one of the things this is going to do is affect the activity of the stem cells in the body. So Okay, so how do we know that the patch elevates copper peptide, right? When we make this claim, how do we know? Well, we have several studies using blood tests that show this. And we had to develop these blood tests. It's not a standard test that you can go to LabCorp for example. We worked with a scientist out in California who has a laboratory, and we hired this company to help us develop the analytical techniques to measure copper peptide levels in the blood. So we did this first pilot study. And no, there's another slide here. But this battery is going to fit. Here we go. Thank you. Okay, so this was our initial pilot study with 10 people, and we wanted to work with people over the age of 60, because in Dr. Picard's work, we saw that copper peptide levels had decreased 60 to 80% after the age of 60. And you heard me mention that number before, in that stem cell activity decreases 60 to 80% after the age of 60. So stem cell activity and levels of copper peptide are closely related. So what we did was we would take a baseline blood draw and measure people's copper peptide levels. We'd then have them wear the patch, come back 24 hours later, test their blood again, and then wear the patch for a week and test again. And we achieved statistical significance with this. So this was very much in keeping with anecdotal information that we had, where people using the patch said they started to feel something the very first day. So for example, people got improvements in their energy and the quality of their sleep very first day, and this confirmed that this was because the product was improving copper peptide levels the first 24 hours. We then followed this up by another study. This was a double-blind, placebo-controlled study with 60 people between the age of 40 to 80. Again, the average age was over 60. And again, we achieved statistical significance on this study. So these are examples of two studies where we show, these were published on the science section of the website, where the patch does indeed elevate levels of copper peptide. Now, by the way, I think what would be good to mention is that the product works on over 85% of the people that use it. Now, some interesting examples of other tests that we've done. If you're a vegan or vegetarian and you're not getting a lot of protein in the diet, you may want to supplement with another protein source, or make sure you're getting enough glycine and lysine in your diet. These are amino acids that are used to make copper peptide. And if you want to make sure you're getting enough copper in your diet, eat more dark chocolate. Right? Or if you don't like dark chocolate, you can eat liver, which is really delicious, and most people crave. Okay. Now this is another study that we did on urine testing. So once we established that the patch was elevating copper peptide, we want to know, okay, exactly what's going on in the body. And this was a 50-person study that was double-blind. Again, people over the age of 60, and the testing parameters were similar. We wanted to be able to compare the data that we collected from the blood study and see how does the metabolism change the first 24 hours and the first week. And these are abbreviated results. You can see the study at our website. But what we found was that within the first week of using X39, that the metabolism increased and there was an increase in the rate of utilization of amino acids. So for example, the amino acid leucine, Harris was talking about a little bit earlier, as was Connie, about they use X39 and they recover more quickly. Well, when we go to the gym and we exercise and we're creating micro tears in the muscle, and we want to repair the muscle tissue and get muscle gain and increases in strength and stamina, we need the amino acid leucine, because leucine turns on muscle protein synthesis. And as we age, the amount of leucine that we need increases. So when we're, let's say, in our 20s and 30s, maybe 2.5 grams of leucine will turn on mTOR, but as we age, 3.5 grams. What we found with X39 is that it increased leucine metabolism 30 to 40%. So it was no wonder why we were seeing people recover more quickly after exercise. Another amino acid that increased in its metabolism was tryptophan. So we were getting people the very first day telling us that they were getting deeper sleep and longer sleep. And now we can see, okay, tryptophan is being metabolized. And this would explain why people are getting a better sleep. We also found in our testing that there was an increase in GABA levels. So of course, GABA induces a state of relaxation. But why would a product that activates stem cells, or a peptide that activates stem cells, why would it increase GABA levels? That doesn't seem to make any sense. Well, if you follow it, what you find is that GABA regulates levels of something called BDNF in the brain, brain-derived neurotrophic factor, and BDNF regulates stem cell activity in the brain. So that's why we're seeing increases in GABA. And I'm going to show you because what we found when we gave people memory tests, that their memory was improving in just a week. And we wanted to see if we could explain that. So I'm going to show you some brain scans that we did. There was also a reduction in blood pressure. There's this relaxation response. So if people have high blood pressure, it tends to come down. If people have low blood pressure, it doesn't go down. We did heart rate variability testing. Heart rate variability measures the muscle contractions in the 4 chambers of the heart. We saw an improvement, obviously quality of sleep that we've talked about. And then we did a quality of life index, a statistically significant questionnaire. And we found that people's overall energy wellness was improved, breathing improved. Okay, so one of the things that people are concerned about with aging is cognitive function. So I make my living as an inventor. I turn 59 very soon, and I want to keep my brain function as good as it can be, as long as it can be. Otherwise, I'm out of a job. And as it turns out, so are you that are distributors. Right? So let's keep my brain function as good as it can be, and all of them. No, but in seriousness, this is a significant issue. And we began to look at this back in 2010. We did a study with doctors Tom and Helen Budzinski, and at the time they were interested in researching Parkinson's disease, and they knew that we were selling a product to elevate glutathione, and they wanted to get involved in that research because there's a link between levels of glutathione and Parkinson's. So we had developed another patch which elevated the antioxidant carnosine. Now, carnosine is a dipeptide. It's composed of alanine and histidine, and it's found in the muscle tissue, the heart, and in the brain. And as it turns out, as we age, there's a number of undesirable things that happen in the brain. The fatty acid content, the DHA levels will decrease, so the brain physically shrinks. Levels of antioxidants in the brain decrease, along with neurotransmitter levels. And so we wanted to see, could we use our carnosine patch to restore any lost cognitive function? And that study is also on our website. And what we found is in a group of people over the age of 60, by using our patch to elevate carnosine in 30 days, they improved their long-term, short-term memory, even the speed at which they processed information increased. So that was the first work that we did, showing that normal age-related cognitive decline is reversible. So if you can activate the stem cells, the results should be even better. So what did we see? So we worked with Dr. David Schmidt, who's a very well-known researcher in this field, and we used a multi-channel EEG. Again, we wanted to work with people over the age of 50 to 60. This was our first pilot study of 12 people. We started a second study of 50 people, but that got shut down because of COVID, and so we restarted that study. And we wanted to assess what would happen over a 3 to 6 week period of time. So what Dr. Chevalier had said was, well, normally we would see changes in the brain over a period of 9 months. So if you put someone on a improved diet, give them exercise, make sure they're sleeping, over a period of about 9 months, because of the feature of neuroplasticity of the brain, the ability of the brain to change, 9 months is about a good time to do the test. So what I proposed was, let's see what happens over a month. And he kind of laughs. He's like, well, we're paying you to do the study. Yeah, sure, but we're not going to see anything. He said, why don't we take 2 measures? We'll do the baseline and then compare it 3 weeks and 6 weeks. And so this is what we saw. It's noted that this woman is 77, because at this age, there should be virtually no stem cell activity. And at the baseline, what we're seeing here in these red areas would be a lack of coherence in brain waves from one region of the brain to another. And the reason why coherence of brain waves is important is that the brain works all on signaling, communication, and exchange of information. And if there's a breakdown in communication in the brain and then to other areas of the body, this can lead to a degradation in our health. One good example is, since the hypothalamus is going to regulate immune response, if the hypothalamus isn't communicating with the rest of the brain, or let's say the kidneys or the liver, then we have a problem. So after 3 weeks of using X39, we see session 2, and there's been a dramatic improvement in the coherence of brain function. People experience this as deeper relaxation and better cognitive ability. And we can see by session 3 that this continues to improve after 6 weeks. Now, some people respond very quickly. Other people, it takes a little bit more time. So this is a 67-year-old man, and you can see after 3 weeks of use in session 2, he got an improvement, but not as dramatic. So when people are using the product, they should use it for at least a month. Most people are going to feel a difference their very first week. But some people, maybe they don't have a good diet, they don't exercise, they're not sleeping properly. They require a little bit more time. And so we can see in session 3, after 6 weeks, that there is, again, a dramatic improvement as compared to session 1 at baseline. So this is all well and good, but what happens in real life? And this is really where it became exciting, because I had 10 years and we put $4.3 million into development of new technology for activating stem cells. It was a huge amount of time and money. And the really fun part was when we began to send the patches out and let people experience them and start to get some feedback. And we went to market with this in a pre-launch in July of 2018. So this was a gentleman in Italy who had had open heart surgery, and of course it left a scar. And of course, scars are going to be formed by an inflammatory process in keloid proteins. And we can see after only a month of using X39, even though that scar had been there for a year, there's a remarkable reduction. Now, this was a more recent scar. And you can see after 2 weeks, there's barely a sign I had a funny personal experience with this. I don't think I've ever shared this publicly. I'll do it now because it's a Saturday. I had been in a life-threatening automobile accident when I was 25 with my dad. We were coming home from the movies, and I hate to admit it, but we had just seen Rambo 3, which I later regretted because I felt like I was in the scene of that movie. And this 16-year-old kid was driving a car. He was drunk and he'd stolen a car. He crossed over the highway and hit my dad head on. My dad's head on. And my father broke both of his arms and 3 of his ribs. And I had my head slammed into the windshield. And because I was the driver, I was holding onto the steering wheel. And we were both in big cars. We were in a Buick Sabre, and this kid was in a Cadillac. And the steering wheel that I was holding onto got pushed through the dashboard. And as a result, I had a sebaceous cyst on the front of my head. And after 30 years, I finally decided I want to get rid of this thing. I've lost some hair there. I want to get rid of this thing because it was huge. So I went into the surgery, and during the surgery, when they removed it, I was bleeding, and they couldn't stop the bleeding, and they had to make another scar. Another incision to get this thing out. So I had a big Jesus cross scar on my head. And I thought, okay, well, if that's not a sign from God, then I don't know what is. And the doctor said to me, I am so sorry. Usually we just make a little incision, we take it out, no big deal, but this is going to leave a scar. And this happened after we had launched X39. I said, don't worry about it. It'll be fine. I'll take care of it. And then when I went back for my follow-up visit, she's like, this is amazing. I've never seen this before. There's no scar there. And so how did that happen? Of course, I was happy with that. So you can apply the patch behind the neck, below the belly button. It doesn't matter where you apply it. Some people, they want to apply it at the site of the injury, and that's so totally okay. It's going to work. Now, this young man, he is the son of one of our distributors over in France, and he was getting ready for a job interview. He had a snowboarding accident. He fell and he got cut up really bad, and so his mom immediately patched him with X39, and you can see in a matter of days, he had a remarkable. Now, this is really pretty shocking. I can't even begin to tell you what a privilege it is for us to get these testimonials, and it becomes because we're in the network marketing industry. I don't think it would ever happen outside of this industry. But we have our leaders and members, of course, all over the world, and they're so gracious about sharing these stories with us, and it's so inspiring. It gives us so much energy and enthusiasm to keep doing what we're doing. But this fellow nearly lost his hand in an automobile accident, and not only after 2 months is there a dramatic reduction in the scar, but of course the most important thing is he regained use of his hand. Now this was thanks. Now this was really crazy. This happened over in Denmark, and this young boy, 9 years old, got his fingertip caught in a door, and the door got slammed on it, and the fingertip got severed off. So the parents rushed him to the hospital, and the doctor said there's nothing we can do. And the father begged the doctor to reattach the fingertip, and the doctor said, well, it's just going to die, but I can do it. And so we reattached it, and you can see the fingertip dying. Unfortunately, some friends who are LifeWave members heard about this, gave the X39, and you can see within 2 months, there's barely any scar there. And of course, he regained use of his finger. Now, these are all injuries. And so what happens when a normal healthy person uses the patches, right? When we activate stem cells, one of the things that stem cells will do is make collagen and release growth factors to repair damaged tissue and facilitate wound healing. But what does this do for people that are normal and healthy? This woman, her name is Mandy, and she's one of our distributors in Australia. And like a lot of people, she's healthy, and she just simply wanted to use X39 to improve her health. And you can see after 6 weeks, there is a reduction in lines and wrinkles. Now, we encourage anyone that's just getting started with X39 to take before photos. Then you can go back later and compare. And she continued using the product, and after a year, you can see now there's a very, very substantial difference. So this is part of resetting cells to a more youthful state. X39 doesn't just activate stem cells. Copper peptide resets cells to a younger, healthier state, about 1/3 of the human genome. And this is why this works the way it does, meaning that if it was just activating stem cells, we wouldn't see these changes in brain scans, for example, because those stem cells we're activating either wouldn't be there or would be old and wouldn't be able to release growth factors. But the power of this is that copper peptide resets cells to a younger state, so now the stem cells can act like younger, healthier cells. And that's why we see this youth restoration phenomenon. Now, this isn't Mandy's daughter. This is Mandy after 2 years on X39. Saying that this result is not typical. I have spoken with Mandy in the past. She eats very healthy. She exercises, drinks lots of water, stays away from alcohol. She has a very clean lifestyle, right, which helps support her results. So I would say the results are not typical, right, to be clear. So let's take a look at some results that I think are typical and representative of what we see. This is after about 2 to 3 months of using X39. You can expect to see an improvement in complexion, tightening, firming of the skin, reduction in the appearance of lines and wrinkles, and of course, that's purely what's going on the outside. Keep in mind that we're using the patch to stimulate the skin to increase blood levels of copper peptide, so the changes are occurring from within. Now, this is a woman over in Japan. So Japan, in January of 2019, we did $180,000 in sales in Japan. Last year, 2021, we did over $100 million of sales for the year in Japan. So we're seeing these remarkable increases in growth of that market. And one of the things our friends in Japan do in our community is they take great before and after photos. And they encourage their team to do it. And this is an example of a really great result that she saw with X39. Here's another example, again, after 3 months of firming, tightening of the skin, improvement in complexion. So these are the type of things that you would look for when using the product. So it's so important to take those before and after photos. Now let's see, I think the next one is the very first youth renewal testimonial we ever got. And this was really a shock to get this as the very first testimonial. This was back in late 2018. And so this woman is Danish, and her daughter is a LifeWave distributor. And when she heard about X39, she thought, well, my mom has a lot of health problems. Maybe activating her stem cells will improve her health. And that's all she was really thinking about. She did great. We don't make any medical claims. But what happened 2 months later was pretty shocking in terms of how much her appearance improved with X39. Okay, so that's it for the PowerPoint. I hope you all like that. I think I got a little bit more time yet. I'm gonna take a sip of water and stay properly hydrated. You all drinking enough water? Okay. How about we talk about what happens next? Right? Got all good with all of you? All right, good. Now, the first thing is create a proper foundation. The next step of what we are working on in new technology and where we go from here is to continue to advance this technology and others in stem cells and regeneration so we can stop and reverse human aging. And so I'd like to take a few minutes and talk about this because I think you would find it interesting. And also there's some practical things you can be doing now to take advantage of this and prepare yourselves. So the first thing, of course, is to create a proper foundation. And what that means is it's good to work with practitioners. You're not really sure where to start with this. There's many practitioners in this room, but create a foundation of proper diet, supplementation where needed, proper exercise, get enough sleep, get good quality sleep, drink enough water, stay away from the things that we know aren't good for us. And then once you have that foundation in place, then other technology like the patches is going to be able to give you the best outcome. And there are many challenges, of course, that we're going to face with our health. And we're going to take a break in a little bit, and then I'll be happy to answer some of your questions later to address some of those specifics. But certainly what I found in my research and looking over the literature that's available, there are solutions available today to just about virtually anything that we have to deal with. And technology and tools are getting better all the time. So how do we go about this process of reversing aging, or at least stopping human aging process? And this certainly seems like an extraordinarily enormous task, right? But the good thing is we have some examples already in nature, and we have indicators of how to achieve this. So let's talk about it a little bit. The second patch that we came out with, next patch we came out with after X39 is called X49. And this patch elevates GHK-Cu. So this is a, let's say, a daughter peptide to GHK. So a good way to think about this is that you would start with X39. That's going to provide the most benefits for you. X49 is more laser focused. The AHK peptide, which is based on the amino acid alanine instead of glycine, is found in more specialized tissue, like the brain, the heart, and the muscle. And at the time that we were doing this research, I had formed this hypothesis that we should be able to use AHK to activate the satellite stem cells in the muscle, increase anabolic metabolism, and increase muscle mass, strength, and stamina. There was no literature on this, and there was no predicate that we could look at, but we decided to do those tests. So the first thing is we did the blood tests and validated that X49 elevates AHK-Cu. Okay. Then what we did next is we started a series of different studies and thought, if this peptide is going to show up in the muscles, the heart, and the brain, let's see if we can conduct a few studies that will prove what the effects might be. The most data that we've collected is with exercise, and using X49 to increase muscle mass, strength, and stamina. So we worked with a group of people over the age, principally over the age of 60. And what we found was after 2 months of using X49, that there were statistically significant increases in lean muscle mass and strength and stamina, but surprisingly, corresponding decreases in body fat. Now, this is without any type of special diet. So we don't make the claim that you put on X49 and lose body fat, because we don't want people thinking of this as some magic pill that you put it on and you're automatically going to lose weight. We want to promote healthy diet and exercise for them. But that was one of the outcomes of the study. Another outcome that we saw in a separate study, which was somewhat surprising, was the ability of GHK and AHK to reduce the impact of man-made synthetic radiation on the human body. So let me back up just a moment. There was literature which was showing, this was with women that had breast cancer, and they were going to be given radiation as part of the treatment. And the experiment was to see if copper peptide could reduce the impact and the side effects of the radiation. And the outcome showed that yes, it would. So this is interesting because copper is used to make Faraday cage. And we know Faraday cage will block electromagnetic radiation. We know that copper peptide, GHK, those levels will increase in the skin. And so I came up with this idea of creating a biological Faraday cage. This is based on the principle or the idea that human beings can be upgraded and that we have the ability to adapt and change in the face of new threats to our survival. So I thought, if we could elevate a number of different peptides that bind with copper and accumulate these to a high enough level in the skin, then maybe those peptides could function as a Faraday cage and block out radiation. So we worked with a biochemist and a doctor in Oregon. We set up these tests and we started to work with people that are electromagnetically sensitive. In other words, these are people that if you gave them a cell phone, they would start to experience very sharp pains and headaches. And what we wanted to do is measure these effects. What we showed in the initial pilot work is that within 3 days of using X39 and X49, their symptoms completely disappeared. They could hold the cell phone again and not get any type of pain or headache. We did thermal scans and showed that now there was no heating of the brain tissue from the 5G. And this is critically important because we know from other work that's going on, even from older work going back to 3G, if we look at University of Colorado School of Medicine, there's some good literature which shows that 3G even will create heating of brain tissue and damage brain cells. So these are, and 5G is, to me, it's worse because of the frequencies involved. Keep in mind, 2.4 gigahertz is the same frequency that's used in a microwave oven. And we're putting these frequencies into the air, and people are putting those frequencies up to their head. So it really should be no one's surprise that cell phones are causing heating of tissue when they operate in the microwave. So this is a challenge, and we need new technology. Since this is a train that's not stopping, we need new technology to deal with this. And we have some preliminary evidence. We're not making the claim today, but at least we have some preliminary evidence that this is the case. Okay, so we've talked about how we can use signaling molecules like GHK to reset genes to a younger, healthier state and achieve partial age reversal, how do we get to the next step? We're using in our lab combinations of light therapy devices that we create, electromagnetic devices, and we're creating new delivery mechanisms that I'll be talking about in more detail at our convention in August. And the premise is that we can inductively couple the energy from these devices over to human cells to change gene expression. So let's look at how that happens. First, there are several molecules that are in the cell that are responsible for transferring energy through the cell. So we talked a little bit about how the initial energy patches elevated ATP, but other molecules of interest today would be things like NAD and NADH. So some of the work that people are interested in are using precursors such as NR and NMN to elevate NAD, but the downside of doing that is that it doesn't change the ratio of NAD to NADH, which is more of an oxidative process. So in other words, you can elevate your NAD levels, but if you don't change the ratio of NAD to NADH, then you're not going to get as big of an effect. But the reason why this is important is because if we can reset the mitochondria and we can increase the molecules that are responsible for carrying energy within the cell, the gene expression in the cell changes as a consequence. And this is what's exciting, because it means that there's a path now to resetting the genome and getting cells, even people that are 60, 70, 80, doesn't seem to matter, that the cells will revert back to younger cells. I'm going to talk about for a moment about how we've done this in humans and where we are with it today. We did a study with Dr. Norm Shealy, who some of you may know, and we did these studies over a period of 3 years. And what we wanted to look at was, could we regenerate telomeres safely in human beings? And we spent many years looking about how to do this. So we created a system for this using light. And what we did was we used repeat diagnostics, and this measures leukocytes and granulocytes. So the repeat diagnostic test is considered the gold standard today for looking at telomere length. And what we found through practical testing is that the changes show up at about 6 months. We looked at 3 months, that wasn't quite long enough, and we started to see changes at 6 months, and then of course also a year. But the results were pretty dramatic. As we age, the telomeres will shrink by 0.25% to 1% per year, until eventually, as we get into our 70s, there's no more telomeres. We use this system of light therapy, and after 6 months, the average age or average increase in telomeres was 8.5%. This is over 8 years of age reversal in only 6 months. Now, this is partial age reversal because telomeres are part of the equation, but essentially what it means is that we have now found a way to continue to regenerate the telomeres and have the cells continue to divide and replicate, overcoming the normal biological limits of what we would associate with our lifespan. And this is really exciting, because now it means that if we can keep the cells dividing and we can get oxidative and inflammatory stress under control, we can keep people healthier and living much, much longer, and having people living healthy and fulfilling lives. And to me, that's really exciting, right? One of the things that you'll see when you come to our convention in August is We have some new technology that we're going to show off that we haven't talked to our members before. We're going to be having the convention in Orlando, and you'll see some of those things. It's going to be really exciting. One of the directions that we're going in is on food supply. So that device that you saw, that coil device, we've done over 10 years of research now into using it in agriculture. So we've taken things like strawberries, grapes, lettuce, and we make them grow faster. They're better, they're more nutritious, and they taste better. We've even done some really unusual things. How many of you have ever had wheatgrass? Okay, a lot of you, that's really good. So we found a way, without genetic modification, just to control the electromagnetic environment that plants grow in. We took wheatgrass and we were able to change the flavor of wheatgrass and make it sweet. And the good news was that we did that and it didn't change the sugar content of the wheatgrass, which is really good. So one of the fellows on our team said, I think we should call it sweetgrass. But so what we want to do in the future is we're thinking about what kind of tools can we give you so that you can have a complete approach to health. And one of the things that we want to do is give you technology where you can grow your own fruits and vegetables. They'll be more nutritious, beyond organic, because there's no need for any type of fertilizers or pesticides or herbicides in these systems. They grow better and they're more flavorful. And so we see this as one of the evolutions of the company, is being able to provide you this type of technology. So you're getting all the proper nutrition. Maybe the last thing that I'll share with you is that we have been very active in our humanitarian efforts, and we're expanding it. As a matter of fact, we have invested money into technology that can provide humanitarian relief. And this will be a teaser. So if you come to the convention in August, I'm going to bring this with me and I'm going to show you, and you're going to be really surprised and blown away. This is something that we've been working on for several years, and I'm finally ready to show it off. But you know, this whole situation over in Ukraine now, and what's going on in the world, it really calls us to help those in need, right? Regardless of what we think about the politics behind this, and we each have our own opinions. The fact of the matter is that there are innocent people now, over 2 million refugees that are being displaced from their home. They require medical aid, they require help. And so when this first happened, we contacted our people at the Red Cross. We've been very active here in Florida, making donations, and also over in Europe. So when this started, we made our first donation of $50,000 to the German Red Cross to go to food and medical aid and water for refugees coming into Poland and Romania. We then made another $50,000 donation to UNICEF. And this, of course, focuses on providing aid to children. And that money, again, is going into food and medical care and shelter for kids that are coming out of Ukraine. We have phenomenal members that are in Poland and Romania. And we've provided them with support. We've provided them with patches. We're getting ready to ship some clothing and things like this over to Poland and Romania so that our members can be there to help in this relief. And when I think about the direction that the world is going in, this is a time for healing, right? And it is a time to take technology, heal the planet, and use technology in a new way where we can improve quality of life and have an impact on things. And when we have people in need and we can just simply apply a patch, and in minutes that person can get relief of pain, and they can begin the healing process. I'm really proud to be affiliated with all of our members of our LifeWave community who are a part of this and making a difference in the world. And maybe if we start showing more love towards one another, some of this violence will end. We'll realize that we're all human beings and we're just one big family, and we should be working to help one another instead of harm one another. So I thank you for your time, and I guess we'll take a break now, and when we come back, I'll answer some questions.
Okay, we're not quite finished, the break is super close.
Sorry.
If I can get those coming up for the X39 stories, Zena, Dr. Tom, Dr. Pam, and there were a couple of you. So what you're probably asking yourself after you see what amazing technology we have and the proof and the patents and the science is we all just want to know, will it work for me, right? And David showed you some great before and afters and some proof, but I think it's really nice to have people tell their stories because everybody's different. This works within the design of our bodies, the miracle we are. And so everybody's going to experience this a little differently. So I'm going to have you all just come up so we can kind of quickly get a few stories. And Anne Moreau, who is an RN nutritionist, I'm going to let you share. Nobody gets the mic.
So Connie told me about the X39. I ordered it, I took the X39. What I experienced was a very deep sleep that night, like sleep that I've not had in a long time. And I went long hours of sleep. That was the only thing I noticed because I, like Connie, I'm a nutritionist, and for 20 years I've been teaching it, and I eat well, I exercise, I do all the right things. So there wasn't too much of a change other than that. But 2 weeks later, my son comes over. He's a glass blower, and he walks in the house. He's 38 years old. His eye is bloodshot, and I said, "What's going on?" And he's tearing. He said, "Mom, I haven't slept all night." He had taken his goggles off the night before, and something flew and hit his eye. And he said, "I gotta work today. I don't know how I'm gonna do this. It burns, it hurts, it's so painful, I can't keep the eye open." And I said, "Hey, I'm just hearing this great stuff about quick wound healing from this X39 patch." So he said, "I'm in, put it on." So I stuck it on his C7 in the back of his neck. He stays around and talks to us for about 20, 30 minutes. And then he looks at me and he says, "It's gone, Mom. It doesn't burn, it doesn't hurt. The redness disappeared, it no longer teared." He calls me up later in the day and he says, "Hey, do you think you could help my wife, Heather? She's in trouble too."
Thank you. And the best part was when her husband turned to her and said, "You have got to be kidding me."
So I'm feeling, first of all, like we are in the future right now, having this technology. And David, you are the Iron Man of LifeWave. I mean, so I actually came to see Harris back in April of last year to see a friend, and there was a gathering of LifeWave distributors. And I'm looking around at people with all these strange little circles on them, and I'm thinking, this is a cult. What is this? And now I have all these little circles on me as I speak to you. So fast forward, just I was asked to tell my little story about just a couple of months ago. I take care of Hucky. Hucky is a 13-year-old King Cavalier Spaniel. My dear friend Caroline travels a lot, and I love him to death, and I take care of her. Cavaliers are known to have heart conditions, so I have to give them medication in the morning, at night. And the day before she left in January for a trip, she had a discussion with me. If something happened to Hucky, here's what she would like done. I never had that discussion with him before, so it alarmed me a bit. The first night I had him, he was coughing all night long. I was wide awake, really worried. The next day I'm thinking, should I take him to the vet? Shouldn't I take him to the vet? I'm not sure what to do here. And because I had X39, X49 patches, that next night, I took a little bandana, put the patches inside the bandana, put it around his neck. I could not believe that night, instantaneously, no coughing. And now it's his protocol, and I'm telling you, he's like a puppy. It is mind-blowing to see. He's 13, and he's jumping around, and it's so exciting to see that transformation.
Hello, so Robin and Gregory, the ones that introduced it to my husband and myself. And I had gone zip lining because I thought that was a really good idea. And my brakes didn't work and I hit a tree. And then for about 6.5 years, I had this hip joint pain. So I get this patch, I put it on, and hip joint pain went away. And it was like, oh, that's pretty cool. And then the next day I woke up and boom, it came back. So I made a call to Rob and Gregory to talk to somebody, and they said, don't worry about it. The healing is healing, and inflammation is probably inflammation, and it'll be okay. And sure enough, 6 weeks later, it's gone. So it's been gone since August of 2019. And about the same time, I started to work out again, and I noticed my lumps and bumps on my legs were gone. And I've had them since my 3rd child. So 7 weeks later, they're gone after 25 years. And there's still more every year. There's every couple of months, there's still more. I can stand up here, but I promised only 2.
Hi, 2 quick stories. One, I played pickleball, Paris. You got me turned on to this. And I have been noticing that my game has improved, my stamina has improved. The first when I used to come back, I was like, oh my gosh, am I really supposed to do this? I'm 77 plus, you guys. And so I am meeting guys who are my age and feeling fantastic. Second story. I'm not used to all this technology, so I'm doing a lot of texting nowadays. My texting thumb was about twice the size of my other thumb, and not because it was exercise, but because it was hurting. So I started using this X39 plus Eon too, I have to confess. All the patches work really, they're great. Eon and X39, and my thumbs are the same size again and don't hurt.
This is Dr. Tom Ackland.
He's like Dr. Man, I'm 77. I'm in better shape than I was 10 years ago, but coming up on 60. I was an athlete early in my life, in my 20s and 30s. Broke a lot of stuff, lots of scars, and I wear a lot of these things now. And God, it was Anne Moreau who said, please take a look at this. This is a pretty stunning technology. I work in autoimmune neuroscience. I work in autoimmune dynamics, and so I know stem cells. I had never heard of David. Brilliant guy, brilliant. And I was like, goosebumps when I think about that. When I first took a look at the science, I said, well, wait a moment, okay. And lots of my stuff has gotten better. Like Pam, I could talk about this for hours. But the worst injury I had was I had a pin, I had a fractured elbow that was surgically repaired, pins and whatnot. And my left arm has never been quite straight. So I was going to tighten it. And then in my yoga work last year, I've been wearing the patches for about a year. In my yoga work, I noticed my shoulder girdle, my shoulder posture was changing a little bit. It was because in my yoga, my elbow was straighter and my shoulder girdle was taking a different tap. That's actually not what I was going to talk about. So it's interesting, but it's coming back. The first thing I noticed was the strength and stamina and sleep, and it just gets better and better.
And I have one more question. So you patched a young woman who is in her late 40s, I believe, is that correct? And it's a pretty spectacular story. So why don't you share about that patient?
Yeah, this is a lady, she's an athlete too, but her athletic career, swimming career had been pretty negatively impacted by a cervical injury, a neck injury. She described, when I met her, she described literally having to hold her head and move herself when she was getting out of bed. And X39 for a week, and she called me up. She could get up, she could move, she She can stand up, she can hold her head. She got a lot of people interested, of course, these days.
Spectacular. Thank you. You can't have the mic either.
Don't give it the mic. I'm another one of those husband guinea pig stories. A year and a half, I'm 69 years old, and I've been an out-of-bounds skier for over 50 years, and I've been in really good health. A year and a half ago, I managed to tear my left knee. Because of COVID, Angela had her personal trainer coming to the house, and so I was doing these jumping exercises. And so I went through some rehab, and I missed the ski season last year. Angela came along and said, why don't you put this on the back of your neck? It's like, what is that? Just do it. I thought, okay. And so that was February 1st, a year ago. But it didn't work immediately. And by April, I was in such misery, my knee would blow up like this. I had to sleep with a pillow between my legs because it hurt for my knees to touch each other. And so I finally went and got an imaging and talked to 2 different surgeons, and they said they had to do it. And 2 sports medicine chiropractors said, I can't fix that. But I put off the surgery because of the COVID and the hospital restrictions. By the end of July, I went, hey, this thing is kind of working again. I'm not going to do the surgery right now. Well, it has now been a year since we started the patches. And I just got a referral last week from the MD to go get a 1-year follow-up imaging, and we're going to find out, but I got to do a quick little demonstration. This knee is 100% again, and you know it was about 80–90% in 6 months. But this, so I'm able to ski again, have full range of motion, strength, everything back.
We can hear miracle stories every day. Dr. Pamela Lewin called me last week. She had a practitioner who had long-standing back pain, and she put the X39 right on the pain, and it was gone. But that doesn't happen for everyone immediately. And if Jeff had stopped, he would have never gotten to his results. So I think that's really important to know. So I want to know in this room, who likes to buy at full retail price? Yeah, that's what I thought. So who likes to buy at wholesale? The beautiful thing that the company has done is they really have made it so whether you want to be a customer or whether you want to be a distributor and share these products with the people you know and love, it is up to you. You can buy at wholesale pricing as a customer or as a distributor. So we're going to take about a 20-minute break. We're going to let you guys use the restroom straight out the door. At the back, if you're like, hey, how do I get started? There's a couple of things. If you came here with the person that invited you, meet them at the back. There's some easy applications. You can fill it out. They'll help you get started at what is best for you. And if you came here and were invited by someone who isn't present, still go to the back, grab one of us. There's going to be several people back there. They will help you and get you going the way that best suits you. And then we'll come back for some great Q&A with David and a little more patching protocols and a little deeper dig into some of the other patches as well. Also, if you could give us your cards, if you've got questions, meet me and Angela Steemick at the back, and we'll collect those cards as well. See you in 20.